Check this out. Rachel and Jacob Nisler planned a big traditional North Dakota wedding, but two non-traditional guests showed up.
Yeah, they invited two podcasters from Barstool Sports. They never thought they'd actually make the trip. Jody Kurzman shows us what happened when they did.
It was beautiful.
Scrolling through these photos.
There's one.
Helps newlyweds Jacob and Rachel Nisler
This one I really like too.
relive every moment of their wedding day, from the ceremony to the reception and the dance.
And it was, I feel like, a pretty classic, like, North Dakotan wedding.
Two unlikely guests made the whole thing a little extra memorable.
This is Liam Blutman, and that's Connor.
Liam Blutman and Connor Griffin work for Barstool Sports, often appearing on the podcast, mostly sports. It's Jacob and Rachel's favorite podcast.
He's just in Albuquerque.
So when they were sending out wedding invitations, they were sure to include their favorite podcasters.
Jacob and Rachel.
What happened next was completely unexpected.
Send Connor to these weddings.
Turns out Liam and Connor had never been to North Dakota.
Guess where you're going?
And had never been to a wedding.
And then immediately, just the nature of our show, it's like, okay, well, that's happening now.
Jacob and Rachel weren't sure the two would actually show up
Going to North Dakota.
until they checked social media.
When they posted their first thing that, like, we're heading to North Dakota, I was like, oh, they're, like, serious.
Actually
They're
coming,
coming.
yeah.
The two arrived in time for the wedding dance, where they immediately made friends with the other guests, all 400 of them.
Liam does not dance. He does not like music, and he does not like large crowds. So that was part of the reason why it was fun to bring him along for this trip, and why our bosses were like, yeah, you gotta go, because this was a big step outside his comfort zone.
Liam was even caught on camera dancing. For the Nislers, these special wedding guests have made their favorite podcast even better.
They're just so nice and genuine.
And Liam and Connor genuinely loved their time in North Dakota.
We had a blast. The drive was incredible. I thought everything was very neat and cool. And
Making for a day this bride and groom and these out-of-state podcasters will never forget.